So when I read the book of Genesis, I don't read it the way most Christians do, where like I have to be like, the earth is literally 6,000 years old, because the earth is not 6,000 years old. It's not. So stop saying that. Evolution's real. Stop saying it's not. Just stop saying those things, because you're not helping people's faith. You can privately believe that the earth is 6,000 years old and that evolution is not real, but by promoting those type of ideas, you're not helping people. Now, I will say reality is a lot more complex than you understand. I would never say that it's the way science is saying it, because it's not. It's just there's a lot of things that are hidden from this generation that you don't need to know about, because it would be dangerous if you did. And so the fact of the matter is, and trust me on this, stop contradicting science, unless it's something like LGBTQ that you can contradict, or if it's like divorce is good for you, whatever. But if it's something like the earth was created in 6 days, okay, so like God is omnipotent, is he not? He can turn water into wine. He can do miraculous things. Why do you have to have the earth be literally 6 days? It's like I heard it says God's not a liar. Okay, well, if you turn water into wine, that's a miracle. Are you going to call that a lie? So God makes the earth in 6 days and it looks like 6 billion years. In fact, one of my favorite things about the first chapter of Genesis is that it seems to follow the pattern of evolution. I've written 4 poems on that. And it seems like Adam and Eve are made in a different dimension on the first day and that they're brought here to this earth. That's my interpretation of Genesis, the first 3 chapters. And so the book of Genesis is so beautiful, though. Like it's really the ABCs of the faith, and I think the reason why Christians want the world to be created in 6 days and the earth to be 6,000 years old is because there's so much valuable information in the book of Genesis. It's one of the foundational works of all literature. In fact, the stories, when I'm reading about Abraham or Jacob or Joseph or Isaac or even the stories before the deluge, I'm just flabbergasted. This is my favorite book in the Bible outside of the Gospels. It is just so cram-packed with some of the most brilliant stories ever told. And they're so short. This is what the Bible is a master. It just has a plot narrative understanding you look at something like the Quran, it can't even create a coherent string of ideas, and the Bible is just so correct the way it approaches things and organizes things. Just getting on a tangent, but you look at the whole Bible, it's very, very well organized. People who read the whole thing through the front to cover, they get that sense of the Bible being this giant epic where everything just kind of strings together. The prophets tie into the histories, and that's something J. Vernon McGee said, but that's really true. Prophets, they do tie into the histories, and they create a coherent narrative that could only be from witnesses. We know Jeremiah was prophesying in Jeremiah because he read about the curse in Deuteronomy. So the curse actually predicted Jerusalem's fall, and just like the Isaiah predicted Jesus. But getting back to Genesis, it's just such beautiful stories. It's just absolutely gorgeous stories. And I personally think that when I'm reading it, my mind is exploding with metaphor. It's the only stories that give me that kind of full brain is Aesop and Grimm's. And Genesis does that same thing. It's really one of the few books in the Bible beside Jesus's parables that give me that extremely deep sense of well-crafted storytelling. And I think Genesis is probably some of our very first stories, and this is one of the reasons why it shows up in Amorite and literature, is because it is among the first stories ever told. Some of Grimm brothers are the first stories ever told too. I don't know if you know this. There's stories in Grimm's brothers that have to be ancient. They just have a quality of naivety to them that they have to be ancient. But the Genesis is just filled with such packed metaphor. It's so beautiful. I'm just these are our first stories. Just like the Torah is our first laws. When man came together, Mesopotamia, probably Abraham had something to do with this. They just formed together and they made laws. That they made laws because they needed them. And the Torah is our first laws. It's what people came together and organized, and they created a culture based around laws so that way people would be able to get along. And Genesis is our first stories from the Neolithic era, and then the Hebrew people, they're patriarchs of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph. It's they're patriarchs. So I feel the Bible is so absolutely gorgeous. I think we need to read Genesis the right way, because I think too many times we tend to ignore it as a story, and we tend to look at it simply as a historical narrative. And it's like, it's not just a historical narrative. It's got the richness of like a Plutarch's Life. It's a historical narrative. It historically happened, but it's got the richness of a well-crafted and well-designed story. So I just think the fact is that we can't throw away Genesis. I agree with Christians. We can't throw it away. We have to be careful to keep it in the canon because it's such important stories. It's the ABCs of the faith. It's just you have to find a way to present it to get people to read it, because it's the law. Like, the fact of the matter is, those stories about Adam and Eve, they explain a lot about human nature, such as the reason why women tend to want to be in a submissive role, and when they're not, they're unhappy. It's like because that's what they're geared toward. And like, we see that women feminists are unhappy. It's just they don't know why they're unhappy. It's like, well, we need the Bible to tell us, well, this is because, you know, Eve tempted Adam to eat the fruit, so she was cursed. And just like Adam has to work, it's like, why do we have to work? It's like, because there's a curse. Now, this curse has deeper significance. It's explaining something. It's descriptive, just like the law is descriptive. But I don't think we need to necessarily look at the Bible as like this Bronze Age superstition, because it's more than that. It is a reflection of the actual behaviors of human beings. It's not just that, but it's witnesses too. The whole Bible is witness testimony, but it's actually the behavior of human beings. If you study the Bible, it's sociologically, psychologically rich with themes that people actually do these things. And you can read the Old Testament. It's like a time capsule where you can actually see these time periods and like get really deep insights into the cultures and milieus of those times if you're really good at reading the Bible. Now, do I believe that Genesis is real? Do I believe that Adam and Eve are real? Of course I do. I think they were literal people. Do I think that Genesis 1 happened? Of course I do. I think it did. You know, I've actually seen what look to be ancient artifacts with dinosaurs, and you see in the life of Peleg that the earth divided. You see in the book of Job, you see it described dinosaur testicles. So, you know, it's like, you know, this is probably there's things that we don't understand, and we're never going to understand it, and we shouldn't even try to. But if we're going to present it to an atheist who can't get that far, we have to bring them to the law, because the law converts the heart. It's like, deep in us we know women should not be the master. Deep within us we know that people have to work or they go insane. Deep down within us we know that there's a beginning, and deep down within us we know there's an end. It's like, these are important ideas in scripture that just like, it just organizes your brain in the way to comprehend the world the right way, which an entire 3 generations, maybe even 4, never got that education. I'm sure that Gen X and baby boomers did, but Gen Millennial, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, they haven't had this indoctrination. And I say indoctrination in a good way because it helps organize your framework for reality in a way that actually fits the psychology of human behavior. You understand the world much richer when you have the Bible as a first principle, just like you understand probably if you learn about Robin Hood or Johnny Appleseed, or, you know, like, not to say that those are the same thing, or George Washington cutting down the cherry tree. It's like, it's an education, and the Bible is an extremely brilliant education because it organizes your mind the way that you need it to understand the world and approach it in a way that's ethical. As is the point of the Bible, is to have you rooted in ethical truths, which many Christians forget. They get too far into Paul's epistles when there's 2 parts to every epistle. There's the cross, and then there's what you got to do now that you've accepted the cross. You have to have good behavior. So that's my spiel.